Welcome, everyone, to episode 4 of the Teatime with Teawrex podcast. Today, I am joined with, I probably should have asked how to say your last name properly. I'm going to go for it. Philip Tibitoski,
You got
who
it.
is the president and co-founder of Young Horses, the folks who've also made games such as Bug Snacks, as well as Octodad, some things from my past for streaming, especially. Also, one of the folks that are ahead of the curve with the 4-day work week as well, which is something that I think is very awesome that you all are doing. So thanks so much for being here, Phil. How are you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, I saw your stream with Joe the other day, and I thought it was really cool, and I liked all the questions you were asking, and like how in depth you were getting with a lot of that stuff, and so I was happy to come on.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we're gonna try to do it again, except I'm gonna do it terribly for you. So just
Good.
that way you have both.
That's appropriate. I feel like the level of where Joe is at, and with Destiny and all that stuff, and where we're at, that's like very appropriate skill wise. That makes sense.
I think it's fine. Okay, so let's do a little background over I guess
Sure.
your games industry work. So how did you start in the games industry?
So trying to make it quick because it's actually like a over 10-year history at this point. We started Young Horses out of school. Almost the entire team right now came from that original team working on that original Octodad game. And the whole point of creating Octodad was to make something to enter into the Independent Games Festival, which is at the Game Developers Conference every year. And so we were like going out of our way to make something different than anything else that was being made at the time. Like purposely trying to avoid like first-person shooters or like puzzle platformers, that sort of stuff, because those things were, and almost always are, pretty popular. And trying to go kind of our own direction with this weird puppeteering octopus fatherhood simulator game. And we put out a free version of that, and it did pretty well, or at least it got like quite a bit of attention. We got some articles on Kotaku and IndieGames.com and some other places early on. And as kind of attention grew and like downloads were going into like millions, we were like, like maybe we can do something like this more than just having released this free thing and then like breaking up the team or whatever. And so we asked everybody who was part of the project, like, would you be interested in trying to start our own studio? And this was around the time that Indie Game the movie and a lot of other stuff kind of made it apparent that that was like a potential road to take, even though it was difficult and like very few people kind of come out of that successfully, I guess. And so that's when we decided to make the second Octodad Deadliest Catch, which is kind of like a more, I guess, like professional version of Octodad, a more polished version, one we would actually not feel like embarrassed to charge money for, I guess. And that came out in 2014, and like there's a whole world worth of information between that first game coming out and that second one in terms of like what we did to make that happen. And that did really well, and then we were finally able to kind of leave our day jobs and other gigs and go full-time at Young Horses. And then we were like, wow, man, that was a lot of work spending like 3 years making that game and releasing it. We should really make a shorter one. We should really take less time to put something out, because that was a lot. And then we made Bug Snacks, which took about 6 years. And
obviously shorter, much
shorter,
more truncated time space there.
Which, I don't know, like some of the reason behind it is that forming Young Horses, the whole point, or at least a large portion of it, was we're going to make the games we want. We're going to go out of our way to make something different every time, to kind of like continually challenge ourselves to grow our skill sets and like see what we can like trick people into liking. And so it just takes a long time to figure that kind of stuff out, to like weed through all the prototyping and experimentation needed to reach those new things. And yeah, so that came out. Bug Snacks came out November 12th of last year on PS5 and Epic Game Store. It'll be coming to Steam next year, and then potentially other platforms as well. And yeah, I guess that's like the quick version.
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I kind of want to talk about. The first is that so you all were working like other jobs while pushing out. It sounded like Deadliest Catch, or was that?
Yeah.
Was that after that?
No, yeah. During making of Deadliest Catch, a lot of us were working other day jobs,
That's
and
rough.
then working on that like nights and weekends, and that really sucked.
Yeah.
I do not recommend it. It was difficult, and it's just like way too many hours for any human being to work. And like also a lot of us were still in school. Like I was a junior when we started working on that second one in college, so I was also still
Mhm.
taking classes and then working a job and then making this game. We got to like, I don't know, stretch the rules some places in there where it's like for a class where it was like, oh, this is a big senior project sort of thing, and I'd be like, can I just keep working on the Octodad?
Yeah, kind of
And
just
like,
submit like what we're doing as our free thing, like our extra thing as schoolwork.
exactly. So like we found ways around some of that, but yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
there seems to be at least like it's by no means the exact same. There's like a little bit of parallel between I think all creative endeavors when you're trying to do it as kind of like a bigger career or like bigger projects, where it just feels like it eats away at your time and your life a little bit when you're also having to like survive. When that's not your main form of income, it's
right.
trying to find the balance of, well, I want to try to make this thing work, but I'm really exhausted 5 out of the 7 days of the week, and then I recover on those remaining 2. So literally, when do I sleep? At least
The
for
answer
me,
is never.
yeah, right. When I first started streaming, my philosophy was 12-hour days, 7 days a week. That's not good. Don't do that. Like I
No,
cannot.
that sounds not great.
Yeah, I tell people like I say that not as like a badge of honor. I was a moron. That's stupid. Do not do that. Don't destroy your body for like the sake of like a chance at doing something, you know. And I would hope that extends to things like game dev too. Like I know people, if they're listening and they're an indie dev, I hope that they know that they need to take care of themselves too. You know,
Yeah.
don't burn the candle at both ends and yourself just to get your product out. You know.
Right. I mean, it's difficult because, you know, if you're taking the appropriate amount of time to take those breaks, to get those days to yourself, and to kind of like recover and recuperate so that you can come back fresh, it's also extending the amount of time naturally that you're going to be working on that project.
Mhm.
So it's a hard thing to balance because you kind of got to fight your own urge to want to get things done, to realize that like the work you do having been like well rested is ultimately going to be better than the work that you do being, you know, exhausted. Like a lot of things that happen when you're exhausted are you're going to make mistakes. Things just aren't going to come out as well as they could in general, and then you're going to have to do like kind of double the work to fix those things that you otherwise probably wouldn't have screwed up in the first place. So it's like a weird tug of war with yourself, I think, mentally. And it's taken a long time to undo that. Like it's taken active work to try and not overwork. I guess.
I think that the problem that like I had, and I think there's like this common misconception, at least in America, I can't speak everywhere, that
Sure.
like that rest people think is like a 1-to-1 or like multiplicative. Like 1 hour rested is like equal to like 8 hours of work, and you're always catching up when you're resting. When like I think the truth of the matter is like burnout, it's actually probably the opposite. You probably
Yeah.
need more rest than what you're getting, and you are just further depleting your reserves that you have until you hit burnout. And then it's like the idea of working almost feels like the most despairing thing as someone who's gone through it. Like there was a month, I think I mentioned this the other day on one of the other episodes, but there was a month this year where I took 2 weeks kind of like unpredicted off because the idea of coming to sitting down at my desk, I couldn't do it. I just could not do it. It was beyond me. I was felt with like terror almost. Like it's like my desk was like a scary bat living in my house. So it's so hard. And like on top of that, you have to balance like, okay, when do I like burn those little bits of like extra energy, right? Like when is like the marketing push where we kind of need to make sure we have, you know, everything ready to go. And that's kind of like the unfair point too, is that the games industry is just kind of always on. I don't know how it is at all for like marketing a video game, but for me, it's like you kind of have to always be emotionally available just in case like that big moment happens, you know,
Right.
which everyone kind of hopes for, where it's going to jettison your career into the stratosphere. How do you balance, like, I guess for you as a president especially, like, how do you balance all of the, I guess it's risk management, like all the risk of burning through like your energy and your work at like the correct times?
I think early on, I spent a lot of time saying yes to everything, like every opportunity, whether it was like going to be worth the, I don't know, it's hard because like you want to, I don't know, I guess for example, like if like someone on like YouTube, maybe they only have like 100 subscribers or something like that, but they worked hard for those 100 subscribers and they want like a free code so that they could play your game, do like a let's play, that sort of thing, or somebody on Twitch. Like you wanna, like you personally, at least I want to respond to that person and be able to give them that code and say like, yeah, like go do your thing, that's awesome. But it's hard to respond to thousands of those requests all the time, and at some point you have to like try to prioritize, and like as bad as it feels like sometimes to have to kind of ignore some people, it's kind of necessary to like stay sane, at least at our size where we're a 9-person team. And you know, while we're also fielding all of these requests and all of these like interviews and press stuff, we're also like making a whole ass video game. And that is a lot. Like each of us has 3 to 4 jobs. So this stuff is hard to juggle. It's hard to figure out what the right balance is, but I feel like the thing that we are the best at is being very honest with ourselves about what we're good and bad at and what makes the most sense in terms of what is a valuable use of each of our time. And that's been a thing, like a muscle that we've had to work out the entire time we've existed as a studio, and has only become more recently like a, I don't know, I feel like we're pretty adept at it now, as at being like, well, this is worth our time and maybe we can do this, but maybe we should set it aside for later. Or then there's stuff where it's like, this isn't probably worth doing at all. At least not right now. Like maybe we can put it in a queue and like when we have time, we'll just like run through stuff. But yeah, it's always difficult because I always feel bad for the people on the other end who are like, this might be their beginning, you know, like kind of,
and you don't want to like
yeah,
accidentally give them a really bad first experience. But the issue there is like they just don't understand, right? There's just like an ignorance just because they haven't been around long enough to know like how valuable getting that like that one email's worth of time is to like a company when there is potentially thousands, if not tens of thousands of people reaching out, especially not even just for codes, for literally anything else that might be going on at your studio, right?
Or even just like new developers asking for advice about like starting a studio and stuff like that. And a problem I've run into there is that kind of general advice in game development and probably most things is kind of dangerous because everybody exists within their own context, within their own set of like privilege and ability and like stuff that they have going on in their life. And so like your advice to them may not be applicable at all, or like and they may not realize that, and they may be reaching for it anyways and like basically like wasting their time trying to do something that's just not gonna like work for them. And like that isn't even always because of like who they are or their ability. Sometimes it's just like the time in which they're doing it, like the zeitgeist of the world at the moment. Because I mean, like a lot of Octodad's early attention came from like Kickstarter and YouTubers when those sorts of things were just sort of getting super popular, like the early 2010s. And like Kickstarter now, it's really hard to get a story or attention for running a Kickstarter because everybody does, or a lot of people run Kickstarters, and like being able to stand out within that group is really difficult. Whereas before it was like maybe there's like 10, 20 Kickstarters in games at least like floating around at any one time, and that's a very small pool, and it's a new novel idea that you're doing this crowdfunding thing, and so like all the press want to like write about it because they haven't really covered that entire world yet. Now if you talk to press and you say like I have a Kickstarter, you better have like some other like I'm also Peter Molyneux, like, or I'm also like, you know, I'm a huge studio and we decided to leave the publisher system to fund our own game or whatever, that sort of thing. So there's a whole world of like, it was just a different time when we did X, Y, and Z. So if you try to do those things now, it's not the same thing. It's unlikely that they're going to work. And so now what I try to do in terms of advice is like pick people who seem like they come with kind of like respect for your time and have really thought about what they want to ask, and then have like just a conversation like we're having right now.
Yeah.
Where I can sit there and like get kind of their story, what they're trying to do, what their situation is, and then try to give advice from there. Because if it's not tailored for each person, it could sometimes like at best it's not useful, and at worst it's like harmful. So
yeah, I'm also taking notes, by the way, in case you hear the clicking. I'm trying to make sure I don't forget things. I try to mute for that, but I realized I didn't mute that one. So I totally agree with you. That's a super insightful take that I think is applicable to like a lot of creative mediums, because there's a lot of things that change over time. Right now, like if you're listening, this is still new media. Like this like podcast format is still technically new media. It's not as old as radio. It's not as old as TV. It may be done in a similar fashion, but the actual delivery method and discovering and stuff like that, folks, it's different. So from like a stream perspective, if someone asks me like, how do I get my stream started? It's like, well, I mean, that information is available. You can just know how to make a stream. There's tons of YouTube videos and tons of content out there that's just like the basics of like how all the hardware works, how to throw it all together, and how to go. The difference there about like it's all about context in the I guess in a creative field, especially. You know, what is your goals for streaming? Do you want to make money? Is it about providing the best show possible? Do you want to do educational coverage of specific types of games? Do you not give a crap about games and all you want to do is talk about politics? Like, you know, it really depends on what your format is, and then you just kind of start trying to figure it out from there. Because unfortunately, experience isn't always like translatable, at least for like the hard skills. Like soft skills, that can be moved between a lot of positions. But if I try to tell someone, okay, if you want to stream on Twitch, go back in time to 2014 when a game that people didn't know was going to be popular kicked off, and you just so happened to be also streaming that game and were really interested in it, and it wasn't an environment where people would camp on top directories to glean the most amount of new followers and viewers possible, and also have a good working relationship with numerous other broadcasters who want to do the same thing, and then just do it. It's just that easy. Just do that. You know, That's not good advice, but that's the reality of what happened with me, you know?
Right.
So I feel like for me, at least, if people want to talk about like how to learn as a creative, I try to do the same thing, where it's like, I try to learn where they're coming from, what their goals are, and then we talk about how to achieve them. And the unfortunate truth is that it's not an exact science. You know, I do and don't wish it was. I do because then it'd be very easy for people to get exactly what they want and their satisfaction there. The downside is that then there's a lot less variables. And this is a lot less fun to do because there's no unknowns. The unknown make it fun. I think that the other issue that I think especially you would run into is like, I think like the level of experience and commitment. Because for you all, you know, it seems like your studio, you had a product, you knew what you were doing, at least you knew what you were going for. So then for someone, I feel like ease of access kind of causes this problem with like Twitter too. A random person can just be like, you know what, Philip, president of a company, I'm gonna tweet at you and be like, tell me how to make a video game. Where it's like, you're not ready for that yet, right? You need to go read some basic literature before you can start trying to have a conversation with, let's say, someone like you. And I think that sometimes can give people friction because they don't know that, like,
they don't know what they don't know.
Exactly, right? And you can't really be mad at them for that. So it's like, how can I either politely, if I can, respond and be like, you know, hey, you know, I can't really talk about this right now, or it's a really long conversation, and then be like, here are some resources. Because in reality, a lot of the time is, you know, you can't really convey what they need to hear, and sometimes they aren't ready to hear it. I know I wasn't a lot of the stuff that I know now. If I went back in time and talked to myself and said, don't do this, this, and this, they would say, no, I'm going to do that. And then they just do it anyways.
Right. Yeah, that happens a lot where someone will come to you for advice and you'd be like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. And then they go do X, Y, and Z and it doesn't work out. And you're like, well, I tried.
Yeah. I literally made that mistake before. I was trying to spare you. So the other thing that I think that that was a very long tangent. So I kind of want to get into, because you mentioned that you all came from a space where you were not like being, you know, like oppressed with working yourselves to the bone in the sense like a corporation's like, you must make Octodad, or
It was self-imposed,
yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what led you to the decision to do the 4-day work week? Like, explain how that kind of came to fruition, if you can.
I feel like it's less dramatic how it actually came about. I mean, when we started the studio, we always wanted a place that we could work at to where like the kind of work-life balance was a balance and was something where, you know, we had plenty of time outside of work just to live our lives and enjoy things. And like we love our work. Like making video games is like a very like privileged, like cool job to have, but it also is still very much work.
Yeah.
You know, like when an older person or like when parents or like family members ask me like, oh, so you play video games all day? Like, is that what you do? And I'm like, no, not really. And like, even in like your case where some of that is like, yes, I'm playing video games all day, but you're also doing 20 other things. You're, you know, maintaining a community, a chat, you're scheduling streams, trying to make sure content's fresh, all that kind of stuff, that people don't think about. And so for us more recently, knowing that was kind of always like a pillar of our studio, we saw some like some studies out of, I think it was Iceland, where they had done this in like smaller trials with different companies and it had turned out really well. And they've been like, we didn't lose any productivity. We didn't like, this just wasn't a problem. Like nothing bad came of it. And everyone was like more refreshed, happy to be at work while they were at work, stuff like that. And to be honest, like on Fridays, we were already half the time like cutting out halfway through the day just because we could.
Sure.
Because it was just like, well, I mean, like most of the time we're on our own timetable, our own schedule. It's pretty rare that like, unless we're like close to a release, we don't have a lot of external deadlines keeping us kind of chained to anything, which is a privilege in and of itself because our other games have done well enough to kind of allow us to do that. But like, why not just cut that day out entirely? Like, why are we bothering? If we don't want to be here on a Friday, why are we making ourselves be here on a Friday? Basically. And so we were already at like 35 hours a week, something like that, per person. And that's just kind of expected. It's not like we have like a punch clock or anything. And so like, why not go to 32 and just give people that entire day? Because I feel like even if we had a policy where on like Fridays, it's like, if you have something to do, feel free to cut out whenever and go take care of that, or go do that or leave for like a trip or something early. There's like a unseen like social pressure, I feel like,
yes,
to stick around, especially if anyone else is sticking around and working.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so we wanted to completely eliminate that possibility and just be like, everyone has Friday off. You don't have to worry about it. Go do whatever you want to do. And then we just tried it for, I want to say it was like from like July to September of this year, and didn't notice any drop in like our output or anything like that, because we were already being kind of lazy on Fridays, and we were already set up to where like, even if there was some like small like imperceptible drop in productivity, we didn't really care because it was not worth it to work those extra hours for that small like sliver of whatever it is. And so then we moved to full-time 4 days a week in September, and it's been great. I don't want to work on Fridays. I don't know, like I feel like it's easier for us to kind of make that sort of change because we're a small studio of 9 people. where we could just like look around in our meeting or whatever and be like, you all want to do this and not work that day? And everybody's like, absolutely, do not want to work that day. And that's it.
Yeah.
At a bigger studio where you have multiple teams, multiple disciplines of teams, and they all have to kind of communicate and pass work amongst each other in a more complicated way, where you have to have like a real structure for that. I think it's like possible still, but it would take a lot of kind of reorganization, and you'd have to have buy-in from like the top to the bottom, because I feel like to some degree there's some acceptance that there has to be there of just like, this is how things are now. We're doing this for like the betterment of the lives of the people we work with. It's okay if we don't make, this amount of money more than we would have or whatever. But like, there's return value in other ways. Like, you're going to retain people longer because they're not going to get burnt out and want to leave.
Yeah.
Amongst other things, they're going to be happy to work where they work, and do what they do, in theory. So I don't know. It's difficult. I don't know if I have the full set of like skills or information to be able to implement at a larger studio, but I think it's
for
possible.
sure. I mean, I don't, I'm not asking it to be like, oh, so solve the exhausted worker force crisis in America right now, Philip. Right now,
Right.
do it. It must do it right now. You have to.
That's another thing, is because if you go to like another industry, whether it's like healthcare or something, like it would be much more difficult to make that change because you have larger forces working kind of against you,
and you
to make it
also
less possible.
need the amount of people. Like you
Right.
need the coverage, right? Like not everyone can have Friday off because it's a hospital. Like,
because at that point it's like, okay, well, you have to maybe have 2 or 3 different teams that overlap in different ways, so there's always coverage, but they're also all only working those 4 days, which a lot of people in healthcare do work 4 days, but they also work like 10, 12-hour days,
yeah.
Instead of 8. So, but anyways, I would go on a tangent forever if I allowed myself.
No, it's all right. I think that you hit the nail on the head with it starting kind of small, right? Like it's much easier to do literally anything in a smaller group setting than it is when you add more and more people. Trying to get like 3 people on to do something, it can be a little annoying. I can't even imagine when it's like, oh yeah, you have a 1,000-person company. Good luck trying to get 1,000 people to agree. I mean, even now, like we still struggle with like unionization and stuff like that. So then trying to get not only like the entire labor force on board, but then also that, like you mentioned, the top to bottom, like the top end also agree to it's going to be incredibly difficult. But I also think that the very important thing that you nailed on is that there is a lot to be spoken about quality over quantity, especially in creative fields. And I think that that's a rampant problem on Twitch, at least, is that I think that there is this weird fascination and almost like fetishization of working incredibly hard beyond what your body should be doing as like this, like, oh, that's so noble, where it's like, not really.
Right.
It's really unhealthy, and we shouldn't be wanting people to be doing that for us to make content.
Yeah, I feel like that's an American obsession, largely. I mean, I know it's like at least in streaming, it's probably a global problem, but here specifically, we very much like fetishize overworking yourself, whether you're being like correctly rewarded for that work or not. You should be doing it because you're like honorable, and I don't know, which is bullshit, because you've just been tricked by people who are rich and working less.
Exactly.
To do that for them, and for them to be like, I don't know, acting like they respect you for it, just so you keep doing it and they can keep not doing it. But that's a whole other can of beans.
I don't mind having that conversation. It's just not very game dev centric if we go down that path. But I would like to make that abundantly clear to anyone who's listening, is that so you heard it from him from like a game dev perspective, but from like a content creating perspective, it's the same thing. It is okay to, let's say you have a schedule and you stream 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. Let's say you have the exact same schedule that I do. if you feel like you put on a banger show at hour 3 and you are happy with everything you did and you accomplished everything set out to do, it's okay to duck out early because you delivered premium content. If you then kind of like do what I guess like the equivalent of like streaming shovelware for the last 3 hours, is that really better? You know what I mean? Like, I think that that's one thing to really think about, you know, in any creative field, is to make sure that what you're putting out is ideally the best. Because, like, it's easy to make content. It really is. Like, there's formulas and there's SEO. You can find the easiest, lowest common denominator content to make. And you can just do it. But if you aren't happy with it, is it like really worth doing? I guess for me it wouldn't be. For some people, I think that they totally, you know, still might be on board. But I don't think there's anything personally wrong, and I would like to encourage people that if you feel like you have done a good job in your creative field for the day and you are in charge of it, it is okay to rest. I think that's just an important thing to get reminded about. I wish I was reminded, I should say. This is me talking backwards in time to younger versions of myself.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of it is like trying to poll and know how you want to live your life and how the people you work with want to live their lives and like what they want out of it. And then try and adapt like your work style to that so that they support one another rather than being, you know, living to work. You want to work to live, I guess, instead. So
I mean, there's lots of cliches to talk about, you know, like, oh, be like Jim. Jim works 2 hours past his clock in time, so that way the shipment goes out in time. Where it's like, or Jim can go home with his kids, and people who need the shipment, if it's not full of like children organs, probably can wait a day, right? Like, I think our sense of like urgency, I think just sometimes is a bit weird. And I would like to think that a lot of people during the pandemic have come to realize maybe a little bit more about what their time is worth, you know, about what they want to be doing.
It seems like it.
Yeah, like I don't want to be like, oh man, COVID was great, everyone was introspective. I don't want to do that. But I do think that it was an opportunity for people to be physically detached, you know, forcibly from like the workplace and from seeing people. And I think a lot of folks finally had the opportunity to isolate out a lot of the noise to let themselves think about what they want to do. So I'm very excited to see, like, in a post-pandemic world, hopefully I'd like to hope that we have a better, like, work process and that we can have ideally healthier lives going forward. That's my dream, at least. But completely different tangent to another thing I want to talk about, specifically in your case. Going from, like, you know, free-to-play title to, like, a very highly marketed game like Bugsnax. So, like, tell me about what it's like to publish a game that's just kind of like your own thing and it's just on Steam and you're good to go versus, like, what publishing something like Bugsnax is.
It's terrifying. All of it is terrifying.
I love the break where you like had to think for a second. I was like, oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think because like Bugsnax was still self-published, but it definitely has like a bigger marketing push from like PlayStation and stuff like that for sure.
If you don't want me
100%.
interrupting, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like the marketing push behind No Man's Sky with like Hello Games, to where like they saw this really interesting, unique product, and then Sony's like marketing machine like cranked up and was like in everyone's faces.
Yeah, I mean, I think it fit within their kind of their portfolio of games for the launch of the PS5 well. Like in the like family friendly, but still like weird and creatively interesting kind of thing. And then there's like a good story to it, and a lot of gameplay that makes people feel a lot of feelings, both good and bad. And so I feel like that
Bunger
fit
sees
well.
me when I sleep, so
exactly,
that's right.
Absolutely. And so going from Octodad to this was actually, I don't know, Octodad, we kind of had a grassroots approach to the promotion of the game where we showed it very early, obviously, with that student version. And then we had the Kickstarter, which was very public, and we released updates on like how it was going. And there were a lot of trailers and like blog posts from us and stuff like that. We went to a lot of different conventions like PAX, PlayStation Experience, all those sorts of things. And Bugsnax, we weren't really able to do that. Like, I mean, we kind of went out of our way to say, we're gonna make this thing, and then we're gonna see if we can do a short, like 6-month promotional kind of period of where we announce and then release. Which was kind of just us trying something different, because promoting a game for like 2.5, 3 years actively and openly is exhausting.
I also don't think it's that effective, is it? Like, I mean, it's nice that you can keep the game being talked about, but if you chopped up that like first year and a half and it didn't happen, would the end result of the marketing be any different?
It's hard to say, because this is part of that, like, we talked about context. Back then, we had our own, like, not only does the worldly context change, but your own context changes. Like, we were a student team making our first game, never having worked at other game studios before, which is in and of itself is like a story that you can promote and kind of sell. And we definitely knew that, and like aimed at that angle, and used it pretty often to get press attention. And like, we can't do that now. We can say like, hey, this is our sophomore effort. We're really nervous about like, how's our second game gonna do? Can we like catch lightning in a bottle twice? That sort of thing. But that's less interesting than like the underdog story of these students who start their own company and then make a game, just by the nature of it, by what humans enjoy and think is like inspiring. And so we just had to approach Bugsnax in a different way, and didn't think we could do that same sort of grassroots thing, and instead wanted to kind of, I don't know about shock people, but surprise people with what we were working on, that it wasn't just another sequel to Octodad, that it was this weird new thing in a completely different kind of genre, but that it felt like us, like our game. So it was very weird going from one to the other, and it took a long time. And a lot of that was like, hey, we're figuring out a lot of new approaches to things that we haven't done before, or tried yet, and we needed the time to kind of mess up and fix things, and I don't know, try a bunch of stuff until we found what actually worked. Because like, Bugsnax is a like much more complicated game than Octodad is. Octodad is largely like a physics sandbox.
Yeah.
And there's some story to it, and there's voiceover and stuff like that, but not an ensemble cast of 14 characters with like a Metroid like hub and spoke structure to like the level design, and like, you know, over 100 Bugsnax, which are all AI, and like, it just, the complexity just like gets bigger and bigger.
It's very compounded by comparison.
For a team of 9 people, that's like, it was pretty ambitious and like somewhat stupid to try and tackle, like, which we try to keep that kind of naive nature to ourselves on purpose, of like, we're going to go out of our way to do something we haven't done before, that we're not experienced in, because that seems to be where we create our best stuff. And it's not always like the most perfectly polished, juicy game, but it's like, they tried something here, and this is like bizarre, and it makes me feel things.
I agree.
And, you know, so that's kind of what we go for. I don't know, I kind of went on a tangent there as usual, but
like, I think that there is a lot of merit, and I think there's absolutely a market for people who want brand new experiences. They want to be perfect. You know, there's some of my favorite games are like kind of not hyper polished indie titles, because I get what the concept of the game is, and it's like, did the game deliver on the concept? Yes, no. Like, it's not about like, oh, I could clip through the floor over here, or this part was really hard, or I got lost this one time, and then, you know, it tanks the review, because that's just how a lot of gamers are. Like, unfortunately, a lot of people are, you hit a snag, or they'll hyper focus on something, and that becomes like the entire argument about why they don't like something. But for the remaining people who just, you know, maybe for whatever reason, just are okay with trying something brand new, there's stuff for them, and I think there should be stuff for them. And I also personally think that trying new things and failing, I would rather be doing that than making the same thing over and over and over again. Because ideally, even if you follow many times, like some people do, and make mistakes, I'm pointing at myself if you're listening. At least you try doing something different, and hopefully maybe someone who is consuming that media might make something even better or something even more interesting, because that's like how inspiration works, right? Is you never know exactly what your content's gonna do. This podcast is relatively small, but like I just wanted to make it because I see a void in the content, right? Like I don't think people talk about games industry stuff too often, and I find it fascinating, so I'm gonna make stuff on it, even if there isn't a large market for it, just because I want to. So I have mad respect for you all, trying so hard to make something so different and so unique, and isn't just kind of like a cookie cutter thing. Not everything has to be super marketable, and things are allowed to be niche and fun. Not everything has to be Call of Duty Shoot 'em 5000, the sequel, pre-sequel.
Yeah, and I mean it's like it's also, I don't know, there's context there in that like we know what our like ability and like kind of skill level is as a studio individually, and like what we can accomplish within like a reasonable amount of time within like, you only have so many years to live, and so it's like how do you want to spend them, and we're not going to go and try and make a Call of Duty or a Destiny, because that's just like absurd. The idea that we'd try and make a game that like polished or big doesn't make any sense. So we have to play to our strengths, which is like world building, characters, humor, and an obsession over making mechanics very physical in a game, very physics based, even if it doesn't always like, it's not always snappy and like
there's some built-in jank. We can just call it that.
Yeah,
some
built-in jank. I think that's good. Jank. There's like a whole subgenre called fumblecore, which I don't know if people still use that term or not.
I've never heard that term before, but I immediately, there was like an image in my head of what I presume it to be.
Yeah, like QWOP. Getting over it with Bennett Foddy, Minotaur in a China Shop.
There was like
Search
one
and
weird
Sin.
like soccer game, which was like a completely AI controlled like physics QWOP based soccer game I saw once.
Yeah, there's all sorts of games like that where it's like they just lean into the jank.
Well, there's also something to be said about like defying design like sensibilities at any given time. God, am I really about to say this? I hate myself. Dark Souls.
Sure.
So Dark Souls 1. We're gonna say Dark Souls 1, where I think it's Miyazaki. He sees all of the things that are trending with like Nintendo products and like other products, and he just says, "No, I will do none of that. In fact, I will do the opposite of some of those things that will make you hate my game. Right. But you'll buy it and you'll play it." And like that was the truth, right? Is that you have archaic checkpointing systems by like opening up secret paths. You have cryptic messages that don't make sense. You have PvP where it's like determined by 95% netcode, and you're gonna get backstabbed, and you're gonna be angry because you burned your humanity right in front of the boss, and before you entered it, you got invaded, and then you died, and you don't have any more humanity, so you lose your health bar. And it's annoying, like it's Dark Souls.
But you want to go back.
But you do, right? Yeah. So there's something to be said about like built-in jank isn't bad. I think part of it's like leaning into it. It's whether or not you acknowledge the existence of something or not. I guess it kind of does come down to the meme of like, is it a feature or is it a bug, right?
Right. Well, you can make it a feature.
Exactly.
Like you have to decide and be intentional about it and kind of understand where's too much and where's like just right, in terms of like what will someone tolerate to the point of frustration, but also make them want to come back and like do better the next time, and where this person's just gonna like throw their Xbox out the window or whatever. And like that just takes a lot of testing and practice and stuff like that, and it's something that we did like a lot and do a lot during like developing our games, is like testing very, very early and very often. So.
It kind of reminds me of like the tenets of like improv as like a skill set, to where if you've ever taken an improv class, chat, there's like these rules you're taught. The most common one everyone seems to know is the yes and, to where when you're having a conversation with somebody for like a stage or theatrical presentation, it's like all ad-libbed. You're supposed to yes and whatever the person's doing with you. You're supposed to lean into whatever their idea is. But the best improv players know when to break those rules. I would almost feel like a game design or just creatives in general is kind of the same thing. If you are skilled enough at what you do, breaking the rules is acceptable and can create really awesome stuff.
But you have to be good enough at it to know when
Correct.
you should or should not break those rules.
Or else you're going to be like walking out like me doing my first stand-up being like, it can't be that hard, can it? We don't talk about that. I was a very naive college student who thought he was very funny. I wasn't.
I mean, at least you tried, though. Like, a lot of people wouldn't try.
I did. And I learned how hard it was. So now I got mad respect for anyone who can, like, write effective stand-up comedy. Because I cannot. I can purely just react. I can be a be a POS who's just, like, in the bottom right corner of a YouTube screen being like, look at this game trailer! Like, that's, like, the extent of what I can do for comedy.
I mean, maybe you'd be better off on, like, a writing team. To where you're reacting to someone's initial ideas or something like that.
I'm
writer's
a
room sort of situation.
Oh, okay. So one thing you kind of talked about being kind of like I think the term used was like you went from like grassroots student-led organization. Is your team, has it grown since then?
Only by 2 people. Our intention early on was if we grew at all, it'd be very purposeful. And with the intention of it being semi-permanent. Not that we're like keeping anyone at the studio against their will,
but you mean like non-contract, like you want them to stay with the company
full time?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean we've worked contract with people as well, but if we're gonna bring someone on to full time develop the game, we want to bring them on and say like, hey, you will have at least X number of years of employment here, like. Obviously, unless they do something crazy, but like, you know, like
I'm gonna show up naked every day. Let's go.
Exactly, that would not be acceptable. But like in game development, a lot of jobs are so unstable or unstable, to where, you know, you do a contract and then someone says, like, oh, do another one that was so great, and then they like never bring you on full time.
To be a little relevant, that was a big thing that's been talked about, at least today, with ABK, was that they were churning out contract workers with promises of full-time employment that they would never actually do.
Right. And, like, I've caught myself, like, getting into that habit before and being like, oh, wait, I'm doing the thing that I don't want us to do. And so, like, I'm tried to be very conscious of that, and like when we bring people on, I want them to like come on with some, I don't know, like insurance that it's going to be like a stable position, because like anytime you have to change a job like this, especially in games, this is kind of changing now as people work remotely more often, but a lot of the time you had to move to the West Coast to get a job in games. Or you had to move between like Washington or in California or wherever, like LA and San Francisco, or maybe New York, or like North Carolina with Epic and stuff like that. But having someone have to uproot their life every year or whatever is like horrible for, you know, their overall well-being.
Moving does suck. Yeah,
and so like we've just like wanted to, well, and like especially if like they have kids and like a family, that kind of stuff just gets more and more complicated and more kind of heart-wrenching. And so like we wanted to create a situation in which like if we're bringing somebody on full-time like that, we're saying like we're here for you and we will be for at least a couple years, so that you have that kind of like room to just exist and do your thing and not have to worry, am I gonna have to move in 6 months? And so yeah, we've only grown 2 people since we started, and I don't see us getting much bigger for the purpose of growing, I guess, because like there are some studios and some like tech companies and stuff like that where it's all about growth. It's entirely about how fast can we go public and, you know, get people to buy into this so that we can exit with our like golden parachutes sort of thing. And
Well,
it's not
it's about
necessarily
being
about
the behest of the shareholders, right? Like and stuff
Right.
like that, to where you have at least I don't know who it is because I don't know all the structures that well.
Sure.
But like there's folks who have like legal obligations to pump out profits for your shareholders. Like that's how we have designed this system that we are all inside for the most part. There's a few folks who aren't in it, but for 99% at least of the Americans who probably are listening, that's us. We are in it. And like it just sucks, man. Like there's no real easy way about it. I guess in your case the way about it is to be detached from like a public traded type system.
Which is hard because there's like a whole bunch of things that have to, a whole bunch of very like special things that have to go right for us to be able to be in that position to do that.
Are the rules any different for publishing in your regard? Like I've actually never thought about that before. Like is being like a smaller non-publicly traded company harder to work with like Steam or PlayStation if you want to like put your game on that platform?
It's gotten a lot better over the years. It used to be harder than it is now because I think those bigger platforms and companies are just more used to working with smaller teams now than they used to be. And that only became easier and more popular as like digital like storefronts became a thing, became something that was popular. Because I think right now the hardest part about working with some of those larger companies is just that they're so big, and they have to kind of trade information between so many departments and so many people that sometimes it's hard for them to realize how big you are. And so sometimes they can have asks for like trailers, marketing assets, things like that, and the turnaround can be a week, 2 weeks, and it's like, how are we like we're still making this game?
I got secondhand anxiety from just like that as an idea.
Right. And that's another situation where you're like weighing, is this worthwhile or not for this specific opportunity for us to take the whole team off of actually finishing the game for 2, 3, 4 weeks to making a trailer, and how do we like utilize as much of our pre-existing stuff as possible to make that trailer a reality and make as few like one-off novel assets and things like that to make it, because ultimately if we don't then use that in the game, it's a kind of
it's a wash.
It could be a wash. Yeah, it could be a waste of time. And so that kind of stuff is difficult working with larger companies sometimes. And then there's just like a lot of paperwork that is like clearly not made for a small studio, where it's just like, oh, who is your person who does this, this, and this, and can I get in contact with like your like sales representative? And it's just me
talking
going,
to him, hey, what's up?
Responding to emails and being like, yeah, you can, like, who's your legal signatory on this and stuff like that. And it's like responding to like, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's like over and over again.
I'm gonna CC myself again in this email.
Pretty much. And so that stuff has gotten easier over time. But yeah, there's just a lot of like mismatch of the kind of world that they work in with bigger studios and then the kind of space that we're actually in. But if you can put something out that is like done well and you can kind of prove yourself as like having the ability to do that, then you can usually get a lot of trust from them and it's pretty like smooth sailing, but that's difficult to do.
I think there's also like I think like weird costs of entry for some things. Like I know that I don't know the price ranges, but I know that like paying for certification is expensive on the current console generation. I have no idea what it's like to publish on Steam. I've never even talked to anybody about that. But there's all these like little like gaps that almost feel like intentional pitfalls to like weed out potential people from even trying to work on these platforms.
There are ways around a lot of those things, but they don't work for everybody, unfortunately.
Is it kind of like our conversation earlier where it's just like stuff is just kind of always changing and you just kind of have to be up to date and just know what to do?
Pretty much. Stuff is always changing. You have to be up to date. And if you have a pre-existing relationship with people at a platform, you can often get them to just waive stuff for you.
Nice.
I don't know, there's ways around that kind of stuff. But then also, a lot of the times with a lot of platforms, like the first time through certification or the first like 10 times or whatever is free for like a small studio. But it's when you're like resubmitting and resubmitting, and maybe like you're not, getting better, because they are still paying all those people to test your game.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how invested are they in kind of your game getting out is probably how much leeway you'll have there, generally. But that's like not the case for every platform. With Steam, there's some requirements, but it's not as stringent.
That's strange to hear, because I can go to the store page and then sort by like lowest rated things, and the stuff down there is it's gold. Looks like it's made with stolen assets. Probably there's probably like an actual Mario game just like ripped and then just like thrown on the Steam store.
Yeah, that's the hard part about those more open platforms, is then you're contending with many, many more games, and oftentimes you're kind of lost amongst those things, and it's difficult to stand out. Which is a lot of the time why you can't rely on just having made a good game and putting it out, without marketing it or without doing the work to make sure that people know it exists. Which a lot of people, like, I don't know, early on, a lot of like starting off game developers, like, well, if I just make something really good, like people will just kind of naturally find it and love it. And like in very, very, very few cases that is true, but even then it's like a lot of luck. And so yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're an artist for music, for games, for whatever it is, like there's always that modicum of it's such like this, because when you hear about it, it sounds awful. Oh, well, how do I be successful as an indie game dev, or as a streamer, or as a musician? To where it's like, okay, step one, be good at what you're doing. Congrats.
Yeah.
You're not making any money yet. $0, 0 cents for this good. 2, get lucky in the right way that it benefits your career. 3, maybe start making money. Like,
and don't do anything like wrong that's gonna make you suddenly like lose all that or whatever in between.
Yeah, it's hard, because like it's we don't live in like a meritocracy. Like the best stuff does not get the most visibility. We all know this, because it's a human flaw. Like,
Yeah.
And it's also just like there's no possible way for a person to find exactly what they're looking for at all times. There's always going to be things that are shoved in front of you before you reach what you want. So even if I'm making content that's like perfect for somebody,
right, the
odds of that person finding me, even when I'm doing perfect marketing for that thing, is still like low, because there's a few billion people on the planet.
It's a couple people. Yeah.
That's why, at least for me, in my case, when I tell people about like, how do you like market on like Twitch, is I unironically tell them typically like start on YouTube, because you have SEO built into the back end that can hopefully get you a base audience first. But that's completely removed from whether the content is good or not, because unfortunately,
I mean, that's kind of.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, you can finish off.
Unfortunately, even with like good content and even then good SEO, you're still not like guaranteed to find success. So I typically try to be like, are you happy with what you're making? Is the core issue just finding eyeballs to find your content? Because like that's ideally the best place to be, because that means you have a product, you have a thing that's good, you're just waiting for that moment,
waiting for the right people to see it. Yeah.
Exactly, waiting for the right eyeballs.
Yeah. I was gonna say, because it's similar to, I don't know, we after we ran our Kickstarter and Octodad had done well, we saw other groups both from our school and from other schools trying to kind of replicate or do a similar thing, but they seem to have like missed some of the context that we had, which was we had released a free version, and that free version had gotten a lot of attention before we even started thinking about running a Kickstarter. And so like they may jump directly to, okay, we finished our senior project, we think it's cool, we're gonna do a Kickstarter. But there was no in between there where they built an audience, and so then they launched a Kickstarter, and then it's not successful.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to, what's the term? They're trying to get like buy-ins too early. Like you need to show your work first, I guess.
And I don't even think it's intentional necessarily. I feel like they just didn't know. Like, oh, right. We had to have we had to have people know about this thing to be willing to give us money for this thing.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And it sucks because then you come out looking like an ass on something.
You're gonna know it eventually.
Yeah, one way or another. Like, that's like new media in a nutshell, is that I think that a lot of people, especially like Gen Z, like Zoomers, if you just kind of look at a lot of the stuff online in a bubble, you know, kind of like I talked about earlier, about like all the work that goes into like making a game. It's not just, you know, playing games all day or whatever people think it is. There's all this extra work. So you're gonna have a lot of people, I think, that are younger who see vloggers or YouTubers or Twitch streamers where they see the product but not any of the process. So they kind of have to like retroactively figure out what that process is. And I think they're unfortunately going to be in for like a rude awakening, right? Because they're going to learn that, well, the reason why, let's say, who's a popular YouTuber? Markiplier, I guess. I'm just going to do what he did. I'm going to have all the same setup, and it's going to be a carbon copy, like everything that made him successful, I'm going to do. But, like, that's just not how it works. Like, even if you're, quote-unquote, doing all the right things, you're doing all the right things for, you know, whenever he got popular, 2010, you know, whatever year it was for that. It may not be applicable anymore, because, like, now YouTube has changed. So I feel like there's got to be... It's not fun, but there's so much, like, back-end research you need to do as a creative to, like, find success. And I feel like anyone who listens to me talk about, like, creating things is like, why would you ever make something ever? It sounds terrible. It's immensely rewarding. I would like to make that apparent, that I love what I do, and I'm very happy with the things that I've made. But, like, there's just a lot of harsh realities that we don't get to talk about very often that suck. And I think a lot of people, if they did know, not that they wouldn't make things, but ideally, I want them to not make the same mistakes that I did. I want them to have a life. I don't want them working 12 hours a day. You know, I want them to be happy and to make the best content they can. Replicating what I did back in 2014 is not how you do that, even in the slightest. This is a conversation about you, by the way. I forgot.
I mean, I was just gonna say,
I forgot for a moment, you know, just because I do this thing where I talk a lot and then it just comes out.
I mean, I feel like I've had to come to terms with the fact that I know things now, if that makes any sense. Because for a long time that it kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's a cliche at this point, but like the kind of imposter syndrome kind of thing like creeps in, where you're like, don't feel like you belong in the space, or you don't feel like you know what you're doing. But really, it's like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I know some things. Like, it's important to know what you don't know, or be kind of like aware of like your gaps in knowledge. But like, you've done some stuff, you know things, and like you're also always learning new things, so you're always getting better at it. And it took me a long time to kind of accept that, because I found myself in interviews and stuff being like, I don't know, we just kind of like riding by the seat of our pants and this happened. And it's like, that's not true. Like, that's not how, like, that's how it feels, but that's not how it happened. You know, we spent a lot of time researching all the moves we've made. We spent a lot of time asking questions from like asking people who had done similar things before, how they did it and how it went, and trying to kind of analyze that and see like, why did it work out or why did it not work out for them. We spent a lot of time paying attention to like what's popular right now in games, what was popular 5, 10, 15 years ago, and what do we see that is like on the rise, which has been, by the way, much easier to do since people have been streaming. And then, I don't know, there's all sorts of things like that. And then also you have to kind of weave in like, what are these larger platforms doing? What do we think they want? And then also like, what do we want to do? And how does that all hopefully work together to create a game that finds its audience and is successful? And like, success is, you know, you can define that in a lot of different ways for yourself, which I think is important.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
It can't just be, you know, the monetary return or potential return on it. It has to also be like, did you enjoy it? Like, do you like it? Like,
literally, if your main reason for getting into making a video game or streaming, chat and or
bad
people who are
news.
listening, it's not that that's a bad idea. But if that is the only reason you're doing it, there is far easier ways to make money than to do something absurdly creative and taxing. Like, go do like business school. Go do something else. Like, I don't like, there is other avenues for someone who is purely profit, like they're a profit motive person. I'm not going to judge whether or not that's, you know, good or bad. It's just that, like, if that is your main reason, I wouldn't recommend streaming, because the odds of you being a, like, millionaire streamer, abysmally low. Like, pretty much winning the lottery levels of low. And, you know, let's say even if you do find some monetary success, you know, in streaming or game dev, it's not going to be the amount of money you think it is. Like, I make a living wage, and I'm very happy with that. But, like, I'm lucky to make a living wage. A lot of people who stream full time, that is not the case. They have support elsewhere, or a very loving chat who is, you know, capable of taking care of their, you know, the leader of their community. So yeah, if it's okay to want money, but if that is the only reason you want to be a creative of any kind, I just think that there's better options for you. And the other thing you mentioned too about, like, oh, man, the imposter syndrome thing is such a huge, like, I feel like I hear it from everyone in game dev, like whether it's a streamer, like any position. It's a very common thing, and I almost feel like it's just like human nature. I Googled this for a moment to make sure I wasn't imagining it, because I try not to be like, I'm going to say something with impunity, but like it not be true. I think there's an interview with Buzz Aldrin where he talked about coming back from the moon and how he was like enormously depressed and had like imposter syndrome. Like, I didn't deserve to do that and stuff like that. Buzz Aldrin, like astronaut, like, you know, so even if he can feel that way, like, I think that there's got to be like a human condition for it, and if that's true, then that means that more than likely you probably do belong where you're at. You know, not everything is among us.
That kind of goes into, like, I don't know, maybe more like a therapy realm, but like I feel like it's a lot about being able to identify those feelings and understand why you're feeling that way. You know, like post-release, like after releasing a game, kitty, we always know, or at least I know now, like how I'm likely to feel after having released a game. And it may involve like 6 months of just kind of feeling bad and initially not understanding why, and then realizing like you were going and going and going for months, for years, and now you're not as much anymore. And you have to like get used to that. You have to like transition between those levels of work, or those like kind of, because you get comfortable, and then all of a sudden you're uncomfortable, which I'm sure you can relate to.
I was gonna say, like, I'm the kind of person who's like, I guess you'd qualify me as a busybody. Not in the sense where I'm getting in everyone else's business, but I'm not a fan of being still in regards to, like, I prefer to be doing something versus resting 99.9% of the time, because that's how I was raised, that's how I worked. I won't get into all those things, but that's just who I was. So me having to unlearn all of that to take care of myself has been a journey in and of itself. And, like, you know, you're right. I think it is a therapy thing. If you have the ability to talk to somebody about those feelings that you have, I hiccuped and burped at the same time. I apologize.
That's impressive, though.
You should be doing that. You know, I know that not everyone has the ability to do that, but try to seek an outlet, maybe with friends, and you can talk it through. You know, like, you can't really replace, like, good therapy. But I think that talking with people about it, and at least talking it out through your head, can be really helpful as well. At least for me. Gosh, the amount of time. I hope I don't sound crazy. Do you talk to yourself in the mirror, like, all the time? Not like that. Not that you're like you're psyching yourself up, but you're kind of like walking through a thing, and you're like doing that in the mirror, or like just kind of out loud to yourself.
Not physically in the mirror, but I talk to myself in my head a lot.
Yeah, me too. I was just
I mean, I didn't mean to make you seem
it's
less
fine.
than normal, but
It's okay. It's fine.
But no, I mean, I talk to myself in my head. I have a very active inner voice, for sure, where I'm always thinking through things or talking through things before I say it. And
Find
stuff
the
like
bunger. Get the
Yes.
bunger immediately, Philip. You must. Bunger awaits.
But like, even just like having released a game, being able to sit there and go, I feel bad. Why do I feel bad? Oh, right. I've done this before. I've released a game before where I felt this exact same way. That must be part of it. And it's not even like you don't have to necessarily crunch to be burned out. You don't have to have worked a lot to be burned out. You could just have done the same thing for a long time, and then you're kind of just like sick of it for a little while.
This is something I've actually talked to my friend Jovo about before, because he worked with a lot of people in like TV, and I think the term I heard him use is there is like this. I don't know if it works for game dev. I can imagine it can, but I can't speak with impunity, obviously. For me, when I put on a really good show that like maybe didn't even require that much exertion of effort, but I was really happy. I was riding that high. It's very difficult to come down from that. So like even if you aren't crunching, if you're in a game dev and you're working and you're very excited to finally, go gold and push your game out, I can totally imagine a situation where you're so happy, elated and excited, and then you kind of go back to normal, but that drop from that level of elation is so massive that it feels terrible.
Yeah, it's the relative change.
Yeah, so like I think that he said it was like performance high. Like for me, that was last week. I got to talk to like someone who I have immense amount of respect for, who carved out time in their day to speak with me. So I was vibrating.
And now you talk to me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Yeah, now I'm gonna sleep like a baby. It's gonna be easy. But it's that level of like of that performance high and that adrenaline. Like, could you stop chomping on my foot? Thank you. My cats are losing their mind. But going from that like super high and then crashing down to normal is like, it's dangerous, towards something I think that we should be on the lookout for, because it's something you're not really prepared. You don't know when it's going to hit, but it almost always does. At least in my case, like I always feel it. Like another example is after like a raid race day in Destiny, where I'm on for like 12 hours, we get it done, and then I'm like, I'm tired, I got to hop off. I'll feel like this pit of despair in my stomach, because I'm coming off of that super high, of producing something I was super excited about. So I could totally imagine game dev being similar to that experience.
Yeah, I think you always need that transitionary time, and that time is not always comfortable. Like it doesn't feel necessarily good, and you oftentimes don't kind of know what to do with yourself. But I've gotten better at kind of recognizing it and knowing, and it doesn't make the bad feeling necessarily go away, but it makes it feel like it is okay to feel that way, and that makes it a little bit better. So
yeah. So going from so is your team 11 now, or was it 7 in students and 9 now?
Yeah, 9 now.
So it's 9 now.
Soon to be 10.
Soon to be 10. Oh.
Yeah, we've been.
Oh, you're telling everyone? So hey, everyone, those interviews I've been doing, I am now the voice of all bug snacks. I know. Yeah. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, about that, but no, we
immediately sacked. Let's go.
We're interviewing programmers right now. And we just hired on an artist recently.
Awesome.
Kind of like gearing up for our next thing. So
would it be perhaps the Bug Snacks DLC or beyond that?
Beyond that.
Oh, beyond that. They're gonna keep making games. You heard it here first.
We are gonna keep making games. I don't know what they will be yet.
That's fine.
I was like, after Octodad, I was sick of Octodad, and that's like, even though we love it and like proud of it, we were like, no more of this for a while. And then that's why we did Bug Snacks, to kind of just do something completely different. And now we have to decide, are we going to do something completely different, or are we going to kind of like reinvent or do a much better version of something we've done before? And I don't know what direction we're going to go yet. So
let's say, hypothetically speaking, I have infinite resources, infinite employees, infinite money, and I want to bestow them upon you. What is a genre or a type of game that you would love to make?
That's difficult. That's like, if you could do anything, what would you do? Like,
if you could have any thought right now, what would that thought be?
Because it's like a dangerous situation, right? Like, I feel like I'm in like an interview right now, and this is like like there's like 30 monkeys and they're fighting each other, or like what weapons do you give them, like some like programmer design question. But because like it's like, do I do what I'm doing now but with like zero pressure of like when it needs to be done?
That's a fascinating answer in my personal opinion. The idea of like taking those resources and not necessarily making anything different, but removing literally any pressure from
without
like the
that
process.
without that pressure, do you get as good of a result? You know, like knowing that you could do this forever, not have to worry about it, never have to finish it. That's like not very motivating to me, because I'm the type of, like, since being a student, I was always better at like completing something when I was like, well, I've procrastinated for 6 out of the 7 days this week and I'm going to do this, project in the hour before it's due or whatever. And I was always better, or like the result was always better in that situation than it was if I had started day one or whatever. So giving myself all of that room, I don't know if that would be good. I don't have a good answer to that question.
I think that's a great answer in my personal opinion, because I think that's a fascinating but very, like, it makes complete sense based on the conversations we had why you'd feel that way.
Well, also, I feel like I have a hard time with this sort of stuff because when our team goes to work on a new game, like figure out what we're going to make, it's very much a team effort where everybody comes to the table with like anywhere between like 3 or 7 different pitches, and these are like 1 page of like, explain what it looks like, what it sounds like, how it feels, what it plays like. And that could be a mechanic, an overall game concept, an art style, anything of just like, hey, I haven't seen this before, or I've seen it before but not like this, and I'd like to work on something like this. And then no matter what the person's kind of discipline on the team, whether you're like a sound designer or a programmer or a designer or whatever, you all get to like present those to the team, and then we pick which ones we like the most, which ones we think maybe they fit together. Like Bug Snacks was like a couple different ideas put together. And so I feel like any one of my ideas isn't as good as it could be if I had like a couple of ones from other team members that I have that could like make it a weird super idea that I would much rather work on than just mine.
Sure. It almost kind of sounds like
yeah.
your company, from like a like discovery perspective of like what you want to be doing, is almost kind of ran like a board of directors, where it's like everyone's kind of like working together to kind of come to an agreement. This is a cool idea, we should make this.
Yes, and that's very difficult to get right, that kind of structure, because you can run into a situation where it's like a too many chefs in the kitchen situation, where it's like if everyone has, equal control and say, how do you ever come to an agreement? And it's a thing that we've had to work on for a long time to like figure out of like who has final say on kind of what, and when is it necessary for that person to say, you know what, I know we can't completely agree on this, but this is what we're doing for this problem or this situation. And it's become easier over time to do that well, but I don't know how well that would scale if you had, say, 20 people, 30 people.
Well, to take what happened with last week with Joe, is he mentioned that like he personally felt that his largest growth states and stuff like that were always around having the hard conversations, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're literally doing that.
It's accurate, yeah.
From like a small group perspective, is that you're kind of always keeping everybody in check because everyone's opinion matters. But at the end of the day, there's like a little bit of accountability with someone eventually saying like, hey, this may be cool, but it's just not possible, or it's not fiscally responsible, or, insert whatever the reasoning is for it.
Yeah, early on that was difficult because everybody on our team is pretty opinionated and like very strong-willed and willing to kind of fight to the death for their idea. But just like over time, you like learn when it is worth doing that and when it's not, and also like how to do that in like a respectful, constructive way, to where you like actually are reaching a helpful result for everyone and not just, treading water, I guess.
Yeah.
And that just took a lot of kind of team building, empathy building, kind of stuff like that. Like every quarter we have a quarterly review, And that's not just of like your performance or whatever. It's also just saying like, hey, here's what's going on in my life right now, if that person wants to share this. And this is why like maybe I've been kind of absent for a couple weeks this quarter, or I've been doing this and that. And it kind of gives room to say the things that you otherwise didn't think to say or didn't want to bother somebody with or whatever. But I think it sets us up to do better in the future, because then you can kind of understand where someone's coming from and maybe why they were like, I don't know, snippy with you one day or something.
Sure.
It's like there could be something going on with them that you have no idea about that's kind of affecting their mood, and knowing about that eventually, or even just being able to talk about it a little bit, I think results in always like better future conversations and communication in general. And like doing that over and over again, I think has left us in a very good spot where we understand one another better. And so those conversations, when we do have to make a decision, are easier to have, kind of like you were saying with Joe, where it's like the more you have those difficult conversations, the easier it gets, or at least the more you know you're going to get through them and it's going to be okay, basically, rather than it being like a big, scary, insurmountable thing.
Yeah, that's something that you definitely, I think, lose when you're working with larger and larger groups for like two reasons. One is that every like level of communication you add to like an email chain gets exponentially more complicated because more people are being pinged. There's like, I remember I saw like a video on it where they did like the math of like how many points of communication you're adding like after X number of like employees, and it just gets exponentially more complicated.
Yeah,
So
I'm terrified of that happening.
Yeah, so you have like that problem, but then you have like the secondary problem of like, it's hard for a lot of people for obvious reasons, because like culturally we've been raised this way to be emotionally available like at the workplace, to where you can openly share with a coworker being like, hey, I'm having a hard time because of XYZ, and like I'll really appreciate it if you all, you know, would be a little more lenient with me during this time. Like that's not a thing you hear. I never heard it at Best Buy, even though I'm sure that was true for literally everybody who worked there. Even though that should be the truth.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that's great. And I hope that more companies can hopefully do that in the future. It's something that I try to do with my audience that I sometimes fail at, just because it's scary, right? It's scary.
Oh yeah.
Telling someone who you don't entirely know how they're going to react, you know, what's going on in your life. But hopefully if you do it in the right way, it is better for everybody involved. So we are getting close to wrapping up. We got about 5 minutes left. So is there anything that's coming up that you want to plug? I know you have the Bug Snacks DLC coming out.
Yeah, Bug Snacks is currently out on PS5, PS4, Epic Games Store. It'll be out on Steam next year. And then we're working on the Isle of Big Snacks, is like a free content update for Bug Snacks. So anybody who owns it, no matter what platform they own it on, will get this for free just as an update, which adds like a whole new mini island with 12 new Bug Snacks and about 30 new quests, I think, and a bunch of new dialogue and story that all kind of fits within the context of the game. And it takes place during the main game, but if you have just like a save where you've beaten it, you can just kind of hop back in and go there and do that stuff. And then also within that update, there's like over 100 kind of mailbox challenges, because now you have your own hut in Snacksburg, like in the town. And you can go to your mailbox and you'll get challenges in the mail throughout the game from different characters in the game to go do weird kind of quests and stuff in the game, like, oh, bring me 10 of these Bug Snacks, make me look like, I don't know, like a beautiful breakfast person or something, or like, oh, I left this in this area, can you go find it for me? And when you bring those things back, you get a bunch of cool customization items for your kind of hut in town that you can then dress it up and decorate. And there's like a ton of those to find. And then also randomly throughout the world now, some Bug Snacks wear hats, and if you capture them while they're wearing that hat, you then have that hat. And in town at Gramble's little barn farm area in the stables there where you can keep certain bug snacks if you want to. You can then assign the hats that you found to them. And there's like a hat watch where you can see like, oh, what's out in the wild right now? Where can I find it? I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff like that. And so yeah, I don't know. We've added a bunch of stuff to the game. It's free. That'll be early next year. And then beyond that, we'll see. Probably bringing the game to as many places as possible so as many people can play it in their favorite place as possible.
I personally cannot believe that you would steal Pokemon's shiny Pokemon system and then just call it hats. How could
I mean,
you?
a lot of this was like, oh, we can finally add all the stuff that we wanted to add initially, but didn't have the time in order to like actually finish the game and put it out. So yeah, it's just being able to go back and do that stuff, which is pretty satisfying and fun.
Yeah, I bet. Because, like, oh, man, 2 minutes. I don't have time to ask this question. I'm going to ask it anyways. Super short form answer. Is, like, this kind of stuff, at least in your experience, like DLC, I want to say this carefully. I don't want to say it's, like, cutting room floor, but, like, is DLC sometimes, like, stuff that you really wanted to make but ran out of time to make?
With bug snacks, it is. It's like a mixture. Like the big ideas are things we wanted to make and didn't get to put in the game. And obviously all the details were figured out later because we didn't actually make it until more recently. With Octodad, it was entirely like, we should just make some more Octodad. And it wasn't anything like, oh, we didn't get to do this before, so let's do it now.
Gotcha. I wanted to make it so I want to make sure everyone at home knows I'm not saying that like they intentionally left stuff out to put as DLC, because that is a misconception that a lot of gamers have. The DLC is just like, oh, they cut it out and then
they were holding on to this
more money for it. And like, yeah, I'm sure, bud. Yeah. Okay.
I wish we had been able to make that much stuff to where we could have just been like, oh, we'll just not release this part. I don't know. Like that idea. Like I understand where people are coming from and why they kind of might think that, because they just don't know enough to know what's actually going on.
The place of ignorance, right?
Yeah, but like, yeah, there's like never a situation in which something that is like finished and we like, we're purposely cutting from the game, because we would always want to give people like more for their dollar and their time when we have it. So.
Yeah, pretty much every creative I speak with is always like, it's I'd like to think that I'm not absurdly lucky, and this is just the mentality, is that people don't want to just like take your money. Like they want to give you a cool thing because they like their cool thing.
Right.
Okay, chat. So we got to wrap it up. It is 8 p.m. Sword by. Thank you so much, Philip, for coming by. You can, like I said, you can buy Bug Snacks today if you want. I think it's a marvelous game. Same with Octodad. Octodad's a little more frustrating, but I think it's a fun kind of frustrating. It's got that built-in jank that everyone just loves. Also, for him being here, we are donating this time $250 to St. Jude Children's Hospital in his honor, as a thank you for him being here. You can follow him on Twitter at PTibz, PTIBZ, and also Young Horses at Young Horses, which is the game dev company. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's fun.
Yeah. Chat, I'm going to run the last 3 minutes of ads, and I am obligated to run, and I will see you all next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great one.